Welcome to the Wealth Transfer with TC. Today, I'm going to be talking about ZNOG. I'm going to share some information concerning what their timeline is according to what they're saying. So I put something together so that I can share it with all of you and so we can get an idea about how long this is all going to take. I'm also going to mention 5 or 6 different things that you will need to look out for down the road in the future concerning whether or not if they have a viable well or not. Now, first, before I get into this, folks, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just sharing information, giving you my thoughts and my opinions on that information. And if you guys like these videos that I make, you want to support, those links are down below in the description and also in the comment section of this video. Now, one of the things before I really get started, Zion Oil and Gas is a very high-risk investment. All right, if you decide that you do want to do this, you want to purchase Zion Oil, you can buy it on Fidelity, Charles Schwab, Moomoo, and I believe there might be a few other sites that you can actually buy Zion Oil on. But it's high risk because this is a make or break situation for Zion Oil. And what has happened is MJ02 was not a viable well, and so they are going back into MJ01, and this well at first was not a viable well. They were actually able to get some oil, but not enough to make it a viable well. So this is very important concerning Zion Oil and its future, and they have to have a viable well in order for this company to survive. Otherwise, it's going to be several more years before they can find somewhere else to drill, pack up the drill, move it over there, and a lot of people probably will dump a lot of Zion Oil stocks. So they may not have the funds to survive if people know that they have to wait another 2 years before they drill again. Unless they decide to try to go back into MJ02. If MJ01 does not become a viable well, then of course, then you could drag this out a whole nother year. All right, so the first thing is Zion Oil is currently sitting at 0.072 cents. So basically 7 cents. It opened up today at the same rate where it's at right now. It's only dropped down to 7 cents. Now, when Zion Oil last put out their update, on April the 8th, Zion Oil actually almost hit 10 cents. A lot of people were FOMOing in, and when you actually look at the update, you realize that there is delays and people weren't really reading the information, or they were misreading it, and so now the price has actually come back down, and that was actually on April the 9th where it almost hit 10 cents, so it's actually at the same rate as it was. And I shared with you guys, anytime that Zion Oil does an update and it perceives to be positive, it's going to go up, but it's always going to come down. Do I think it's going to go down to 6 cents? Well, we are in the month of May because today is May the 1st. And I'm actually looking for 2 updates from Zion Oil, a minor update and a major update. And the minor update, I believe, will deal with all the personnel being in Israel, and they're preparing themselves to start getting themselves on the ground. Then, maybe later on, towards the end of the month, we'll get something to the effect of boots are on the ground and we're beginning operations, right? And I do believe that we're going to see some type of rise in the price of Zion Oil. But because the way Zion Oil does their media, you may get all that in one update towards the end of May. And that does remind me, because Zion Oil social media, as far as them reaching out and keeping their investors updated, but also just keeping them interested, they don't do a very good job. And maybe once they have boots on the ground and they are going into MJ01, maybe we'll see a lot more little updates as far as trying to keep people encouraged. So before I get into the timeline, I have to discuss the annual meeting of stockholders, which is coming up on June the 5th of 2024. Now, this is very important because there's some voting that is taking place, but what is going to take place is that they're asking for an approval on an amendment for additional number of shares of common stocks available under the 2021 Omnibus Incentive Plan for employees, directors, and consultants, reserving for issuance there under an additional 20 million shares of common stock, and therefore increasing the number of shares the company is authorized to issue thereunder from 38,823,500 to 58,823,500 shares. This is for employees and directors and consultants. The price of where Zion Oil is right now, 20 million shares, only comes out to about $1.4 million. So probably more than likely everybody's going to vote yes if it's something that needs to happen. But also, too, you got to keep in mind this could bring dilution later on. Now, back in December of 2023, they had an update, believed that their target date for starting was by the end of quarter one. Quarter one ended in March, so we are now into quarter two. But I'm going to get into this timeline because it looks like we are about 6 weeks behind according to the information that they have given us. And this might have to do with the war in Israel. And there's going to be a lot of other things that could influence what happens with Zion Oil and the price. Now, their last important update was on April the 8th of 2024. Most of you have probably already read it, so I'm not going to go over everything. Right? And it says, as Passover season approaches, marking a time of God's miracles for Israel, we are pleased to share some encouraging developments in our MJ01 recompletion project. We have begun working on visa applications for our rig crew in preparation for their entry into Israel. Upon the completion of the work visa process, the crew will travel to Israel and begin inspecting the rig to make sure it conforms to industry requirements for workover operations. We anticipate boots on the ground by mid-quarter two. All right, so they're not even here within Israel yet. So at the time of this update, they were working on the visa applications. And so we are expecting, and you'll see later on, the boots on the ground should happen this month. Afterwards, the rig will rig down, slide the drilling rig over several meters, and rig upon the MJ01 well location. The crew will then open the well and continue to follow the approved work plan in conjunction with the selective service providers. This should occur toward the end of quarter two or early quarter three, depending on the subsurface conditions encountered during the reopening phase and contractor scheduling availability. We have made strategic adjustments to control both cost and time. Despite the typical delays during Passover, which this year begins on the evening of April 22nd and ends on the evening of April the 30th, we have satisfied all regulatory requirements necessary to commence operations, including, as previously mentioned, approval by the Supervisory Committee. We are ready and will move forward following the holiday period. Additionally, due to the ongoing shareholder response, our unit program has been extended until Passover, April 30th. I also believe that action may have been extended again. So there we have it as far as the dates and everything. And I'm going to go ahead and go over some of these different things. All right, so this is the timeline that I'm getting ready to share with you. And I have the dates and expected time frames. Now, one of the things I do want to bring up before I get into this is that the one thing that could affect the price of Zion oil, because we have seen in the past that when oil goes up, sometimes Zion oil will go up. I've also seen it go down. Now, if there are conflicts that increase while they're drilling or something was to happen that could shut down the drill for a period of time, those are the things that could happen. There's many, many delays. And you can see the price of crude oil, WTI is at $79.32 a barrel, right? And Brent crude is $83.70. So as long as oil continues to go down, and there's more peace in the Middle East, you probably will see the price of Zion oil go down a little bit. I don't expect it to go down too much because there's a lot of people that are trying to get in before things really take off for Zion oil. I don't expect the price to drop too much more, but if it does, it's just a benefit for anybody who wants to pick up more shares. So here's this timeline, and this is according to what they have said. All right, so the original operation start date, the Q1 start date was March 31st. Well, by March 31st. So I estimate they're probably about 6 weeks behind. All right, and down here you can see what quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, and quarter four. Now remember, they said that they would start in later quarter two or early quarter three. So May 16th is boots on the ground. And that, I believe, is the next major public relations update. All right, when they say we're out boots on the ground, we're getting the rig together, we're getting everything ready, but we might see that particular update at some point in May. Now, the other thing is too, I don't have any idea, at least this time around, because we always thought that these kind of weird conspiracy things about Zion Oil's hiding information and all this stuff. This might be one of those situations where the news is going to be delayed. And it's going to be delayed once they know they have a viable well. And if they want to get investments from hedge funds and so forth, right, they're going to need to keep that quiet. All right, so they said that they would commence operations and going back into MJ01 by the end of quarter 2, which is June, is the last 10 days of June, right? When somebody says late quarter 2 or early quarter 3, it's always the last 10 days of the month. And then early quarter 3, I always consider it to be the first 10 days of the month. So between June 20th through July the 10th, that's when we should see them drilling. Now, from previous information, they said that this whole thing was going to take 3 months. So let's say they do start drilling in July with no delays, right? We're going to go August, September, October, right? So by the end of October, the end of their 3-month operation should have already occurred. So by October, the operation, they should know already whether or not if they have a viable well, pending no delays. Now, if they have a viable well by the month of October, of course, they're going to notify government officials. And I'm sure there's going to be some type of delay as far as making this announcement, right? Because I'm sure that the government may want to get invested. Hedge funds in Israel may want to get invested, right? And so I'm not expecting, so the moment they find out that there's a viable well, that they're just going to announce it immediately. I think they have to take some steps before the announcement. And then, they're probably going to have a lot of investment coming in, or maybe even other governments or other businesses or whatever the case, or even other oil companies who want to invest in Zion Oil. So basically, I'm not expecting any type of announcement, at least until by possibly the end of November or maybe even December, right? That's just the way that I'm looking at it. Now, they could actually have a viable well in August or September, right, which would push those dates up, right? But I'm just saying that the operation itself, they said it should take 3 months, at least. If there's no delays, by the end of 2024, we should know whether or not if Zion Oil has a viable well. So what if they do have a viable well, and what if they don't have a viable well? And I'm going to discuss what things to look out for if it goes either way. Because like I said, this is a high-risk investment, and so I need to tell both sides and not just trying to pump something up just because it's what I want, right? I have to be fair and give an honest opinion about what I think could happen. Okay, so there's going to be about 6 things that you will need to look for whether or not if they have a viable well or not. So on the Zion Oil website, up here where you have home, vision, news, invest, press release, and so on, you want to hover over the invest option, right? And then you're going to get a breakdown of other things that you can click on. And you're going to click on SEC reports. Now, one of the things that you're going to be looking for is insider buying and insider selling, right? Whether if they have a viable well, I'm pretty sure employees that work for the company will buy more. And if it's not a viable well, you might see some insiders selling off. And so up here at the top of the Zion Oil website, you have home, vision, news, and invest. When you hover over invest with your mouse, and you can see the SEC reports, and you click on that, and then they have another button where you can see all documents on the sec.gov, right? And you can go through, you can read some of these different documents. And you also have ownership disclosures, right? And you can view all the different filings here. Now, when it comes to the ownership disclosures, when you click on that, you should see where it says view all insider transactions, right? So the last one was on 4/29, and there's been a lot of transactions in the beginning of January of this year, which happens, I think, just about every year, where they are giving their employees additional shares and so on. So what you would be wanting to do is looking at and to see whether or not if the insiders are getting stocks from Zion Oil or are they actually buying them on their own. So what I'm seeing right here doesn't mean anything to me as far as any type of insider buying or selling as far as relating to a viable well. So that is one of the things that you guys are going to be looking at during this time period especially when it's been maybe a month after they've already gone back into MJ01, right? And if there's any type of issues, whether or not if they think that it's not going to be a viable well, you're going to see probably a little bit of selling off. But we hope that they actually buy shares, additional shares, because that'll be a trigger to let us know that this is a viable well. So any type of major large purchases, you're going to be looking for like heavy volume on certain particular days during this time period. So I think there's already so many eyes on Zion Oil right now, and there will be people that will be putting out information. And of course, I'll be looking at it probably daily after they've gone back into MJ01. And so say, for instance, Zion Oil's been calm, the volume, hasn't been crazy, and the next thing you know it starts to really move as far as the volume, then you know something is up. And you want to look at the comparison, whether or not if the price is going up or going down, or if they're selling or buying or whatever, as far as your volume. Now, the other thing is shorts. What you're going to be looking for is whether or not if you see a massive amount of shorting, like suddenly, or the shorts have basically dried up, because shorts do not want to get caught up in all this, because the moment that they announce that they do have a viable well, they're going to be trapped, and it's going to hurt them a lot. Now, I'm pretty sure that a lot of shorts that have been following this company for some time, they know Zion Oil's record as far as having viable wells, which is basically right now 0 at this point. So they're probably banking on that this attempt to go back into MJ01 will not be successful. And so you're going to be looking for a massive increase in shorting or a massive decrease in shorting during the time period after they've gone back into MJ01. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that. So the next thing you're going to be looking for is investments from hedge funds and institutions buying Zion Oil. Here, as you can see, I'm on Fintel for Zion Oil, and you can look at institutional ownership, right? So that is one option. Or even on the NASDAQ.com site, where you can look up institutional holdings too as well. Also, according to, if you're using Moomoo, it looks like here you can track institutional investors with that too as well. So there's going to be a lot of people looking out for that information anyway. Now, if you remember, back in 2019, a whole bunch of hedge funds came in and shorted Zion Oil, including Citadel. Citadel shorted Zion Oil and Gas. You might want to look for that too as well, not just investments, but also shorting sometime after they've already started drilling. And one last major thing that you want to look for concerning Zion Oil and Gas, and that is getting attention from the mainstream media. If for any reason Fox, CNN, or just maybe even some local mainstream media sites start talking about Zion Oil and doing interviews with Israel government officials or people with Zion Oil, right? Because if they discuss this or talk about this, this is going to increase interest in Zion Oil, right? Especially after they've already been drilling, right? That's going to be important, because if they do start talking about it and they haven't announced they have oil yet, you'll probably see a lot of buying of Zion Oil, but also especially if we think that it's close to the point to where they're going to be announcing that they have oil, we might start to see articles from the mainstream media. Now, this one is very important, which you need to look out for, and that is fake news concerning Zion Oil and surrounding the drilling and all that. And there might be some coordination by some people or a particular person to put out fake news, whether it's positive or negative. Now, we saw this happen previously with Zion Oil. And if you guys remember, when Zion Oil first purchased the rig and they were having it shipped overseas on a boat, and I think it was about halfway to Israel when somebody had created a fake news article and it spread like wildfire throughout the Zion Oil community. And that fake news was that the boat that the Zion Oil rig was on was sunk by a missile or by a torpedo or something like that. And the price dropped. And so you can see the same thing could happen again, right? It could be even positive. Say, for instance, it's in the month of October, somebody creates a fake news article, the price skyrockets saying that Zion Oil has a viable well, and then guess what? The price starts to shoot up, and then Zion Oil has to respond. And Zion Oil may have to come out and say something to the opposite of that, which would then tank the price. But keep in mind, folks, the shorters can get caught up really hard with Zion Oil if they have a viable well. So they're going to try to do everything to get out as far as trying to cover their short positions. And that somebody could say if the price just begins to skyrocket up to $1 and it's almost October. Right? This is just an example. And the shorts are stuck. They're desperate. They're going to have to do something. And that's what I believe happened when somebody put that fake news out concerning Zion Oil rig being dropped to the bottom of the sea. Trust me, folks, people who short Zion Oil, they're on every forum as far as that has a decent amount of discussion of Zion Oil. They're on social media, Facebook groups. I guarantee they're in those groups. They're watching everything. They're watching all the videos that people make about Zion Oil. Now that reminds me, leading up to the shareholder meeting, there was a lot of people on social media and in the Facebook Zion Oil groups. They were pumping Zion Oil. After the meeting started and they started to talk, everybody was speculating that they didn't have a viable well, and the stock price tanked. But the week before, there were a handful of people that were pumping up the price. They were telling everybody to buy. I was telling everybody the opposite, because I already believed at that point from all the information that they didn't have a viable well. Of course, I got a lot of backlash for that, but I was also right about that. But if you see anybody posting something like, hey, let's have a Zion Oil buy day, where everybody on a particular day goes in and buys Zion Oil. That happened the week leading up to the shareholder meeting when we found out that MJ02 was not a viable well. Now, I could see shorters doing something like that, or anybody else who's trying to be deceitful. So you need to stay away from that, and those things should be shunned. So stay away from people that are trying to pump up the price and trying to get you to pump up the price. So about these 6 or 7 different things that we need to look out for, and just to go back over them really quick, is insider buying and selling, looking for large purchases and heavy volume after they've gone back into MJ01. Also hedge funds and institutions, whether they are investing or actually when they are shorting too as well. The other thing was heavy shorting, or the shorting actually dries up where you hardly see any shorts. And then the last thing is if the mainstream media starts picking up on what Zion Oil is doing, and that's after they've gone into MJ01. So that is really it, folks, for this. So I believe by the end of this year, we will know, pending no delays or major delays. And if you have not got into Zion Oil yet, and you plan on to, I'm not a financial advisor, but you can get it on Fidelity, Moomoo, Charles Schwab, and there's a few other sites that you can buy Zion Oil at, but it is high risk. And right now, with the price being at 0.072 cents, we could see it slide to closer to the 6 cents range unless we start getting some updates from Zion Oil. So it could maybe for a couple weeks go down to 6 cents and then go back up. So anyways, folks, that is all that I have for this today. I thank you guys for listening. God bless. TC out.